So it seems like the Sussex police have released former Labour minister and Jewish Labour movement chair Ivor Caplin on bail in the child grooming case. A report by the BBC said that the 66-year-old unnamed person that the Sussex police arrested on Saturday has now been released on bail until the 10th of April while further inquiries are carried out. This is the only coverage, by the way, you can find on the arrest of Ivor Caplin by the Sussex police on any BBC platforms. I will let George Galloway explain to you so brilliantly why top UK news outlets have decided to completely ignore this story. But let's see what the ordinary news consuming public had to say on social media about the BBC's refusal to cover this story. User Jack Montgomery wrote on Twitter, and I quote, "The most talked about story in Britain right now is the arrest of Ivor Caplin, a former Labour minister who has been attacking Elon Musk over grooming gangs for allegedly trying to groom a 15-year-old boy. It's nowhere to be seen on the BBC News front page. Instead, you get these." End quote. Twitter handle MSM Monitor wrote on Twitter, and I quote, "This brief article is the only mention of the Ivor Caplin arrest by the BBC. It makes no mention of his political background, which is staggering given he is a former Labour MP and UK Defence Minister. He is also a former head of an influential pro-Israel Labour lobbying group." End quote. This Twitter user wrote, and I quote, "Two BBC front page top stories this week. Lily Allen takes podcast break. Russell Brand fined for speeding. One story that wasn't, former Labour minister Ivor Caplin arrested while allegedly trying to meet child. Other news, Labour wants the BBC funded by general taxation." End quote. The topic featured prominently on George Galloway's Mother of All Talk Shows program, where the former Workers' Party MP was spitting fire. Galloway explained the historical context of Ivor Caplin's involvement in the Iraq War and his role in ousting Jeremy Corbyn from the leadership role in the Labour Party, thereby preventing him from becoming the next Prime Minister of the UK.
I don't have time to adumbrate the wickedness of these people. And as a believer in right and wrong myself, I have to believe that it is not a coincidence that the biggest supporters of Zionism in the Western world are almost always, with one or two exceptions, are almost always the most repugnant individuals. And that certainly covers Ivor Caplin. He was one of the main authors of the so-called anti-Semitism, fake, hoax anti-Semitism allegations that hunted Jeremy Corbyn to his political grave. And that's important, whether you like Jeremy Corbyn or not, because it was the destruction of the Corbyn Labour Party that led to Boris Johnson, with global implications. A million people, more than 1 million people have died in Ukraine. Boris Johnson played a central role in that. He would never have been the Prime Minister if people like Ivor Caplin, former MP, former Defence Minister in Tony Blair's so-called Labour government, if Corbyn had survived the assault, and he made many mistakes in the ways that he tried to deal with it, mainly by throwing his friends under the bus, feeding them to the crocodiles in the hope that the crocodiles would eat him last. But that's a story for another day. Caplin and co. in the Zionist industry that is central to the political life in this country now and the media life in this country now. Want to know how I know that? This Caplin story I'm telling you now has hardly had a breath of publicity after weeks in which Pakistanis and Muslims whose names nobody knew were plastered on the front of every newspaper. But a man at the centre of Tony Blair's Labour government is caught out in the way he was caught out. It can't even get on the news. That's how I know that this cult of Israel has become the dominant cult in political life in Western countries. And that is an issue, a story, a narrative that is as true in the United States, where many of you are watching now, as it is true in Britain, as it is true in Germany, as it is true in France and other European countries.
If you're trying to see the timeline of Ivor Caplin's Twitter page, I strongly advise you to not do so. His timeline is full of X-rated material. What makes it even more disgusting and repulsive is that he is followed by Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and hold your breath, the country's Crown Prosecution Service. What this means is that those vile and disgusting content frequently posted by Caplin would have appeared on the feed of these individuals and entities as well. That tells you everything about the kind of political leadership of this country has at the moment. Anyway, the story was widely ignored by the likes of the BBC, Sky News, ITV and Channel 4. Daily Mail, The Sun, Daily Mirror and Spectator and even Jewish Chronicle covered Caplin's arrest. I was stunned to see the Jewish Chronicle covering Caplin's story, but soon I realized that the Jewish Chronicle had removed the story from its website. This is what you get when you click on the link right now. The page you are looking for is not found. Are you surprised? I'm not. Even when the BBC published the news of Caplin's release, it did so on BBC Sussex page without mentioning Caplin's name. The kind of access the BBC has across the UK and across the globe, it's almost impossible for this public-funded organization to not be able to find the person being arrested and then released by the police. This is the same BBC which ran a propaganda show called Panorama a few years ago to prove that Corbyn was an anti-Semite. But today, all its journalistic values, drive, and ethics were enjoying the weekend leave. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. Details are in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you.